asked me a question, and he said, "Are you a Baptist or a Christian?" And I was kind of confused at first, but I said, "I'm a Baptist because I don't really feel like a Christian." And then after I sat under his preaching and listened to him preach, you know, I started to realize that I had been so misled with religion and in the church and in my family, and I was finally hearing the truth.
I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power, the dynamos, the dynamite of God unto salvation.
Men of Grace were singing in the islands. He preached, and he preached hard. But back home, it was like a lot of fluff. But when he got back home, he started preaching hard to us and taught us a lot.
When I first attended Grace Gospel Fellowship, I had been attending a denominational church, and I really had never heard the gospel before. And when I was invited to, it used to be Metropolitan Baptist Church, the first time I heard the gospel, I heard Kent preach it. It just felt right to me. Nothing I had ever felt in a church before, and I was 23 years old at the time. So if you could talk about a defining moment, that was a defining moment in my life when I first heard the gospel, and Kent's the one who brought it to me.
And the only way to solve social ills is through people coming alongside those that are hurting.
When I was waitressing in downtown Pontiac, and he came in to my work and he tried to convince me to come back to Grace Centers of Hope, to really show me that I did have another chance. That made me feel very loved. It made me feel like God still loved me, that God still sent somebody who cared, meant everything in the world to me.
When he gave a sermon called Accepted in the Beloved, Jesus Christ. The passage was from Ephesians. I had never heard that before. And of years of going to different churches and just being never always really a religion of works, I heard that, and knowing that I was accepted in Jesus for being me was just joy.
He stopped and bought all the kids ice cream on the block. Then the next weekend, before you know it, Pastor is behind the ice cream man, except this time he had the ice cream come just for the children.
After my dad passed and my niece had taken her life, and it kind of hit me hard, and I was struggling with sobriety. And Pastor was kind of guiding me through it, and I don't know, he called my phone at 1:30 in the morning on a Tuesday night, telling me he couldn't sleep because I was on his mind right out of the blue. And he just kind of, wow, really?
The first time I heard him preach, he preached about grace and that everybody is a sinner and God forgives you. And when I heard that message, I was able to forgive myself for some of the things I did to others.
We can do all things through Christ that strengtheneth us. That should be your attitude. Nothing can stop us. We're His church.
I remember in my lowest point, Pastor came to me and told me that I would be a keeper, that I'm a keeper. And I didn't understand what that meant. But throughout the years, he's been a man who's made a significant impact in my life. Someone that I try to follow because he tries to follow Christ.
He asked me why me and Jesse were not married, and I said because I don't have money for, you know, the wedding and this and that, and he told me all that stuff is cotton candy. And what it boils down to is I needed to be right with God. So me and Jesse decided that it was time for us to get married, and all that other stuff didn't mean as much as our relationship with the Lord.
The grand opening of the new church, and all these reporters kept coming up to Pastor Clark and asking him, you know, how did he do it, and you know, how many people did it take to do this, and Pastor just, no matter what, kept giving all the glory to God, just saying he had nothing to do with it, that God was the reason that any of this happened.
I often say we believe in the big G, but it's not government passing out checks. It's a God who's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think.
I remember when I first went to Seneca Street, and there was a whole lot of things going on in my life, and I needed somebody that I could trust, and I needed somebody who would believe me. So I turned to Pastor, and he counseled me through what I was going through. Not only did he counsel me, he became my spiritual father, and most of all, he became my friend.
He did a sermon about all the men in the Bible and them just not being the men that God would like us to be. And as he went through it and he identified all the men in there, it made me realize I didn't have to be good enough for God to save me and get into my life and help me understand God's grace and how he uses people in different situations.
When he came over to my house, my family's house, when we thought my aunt had cancer, and it was just like a very loving and comforting thing to know that he would leave church early just for my family and me.
It was report card Sunday and I got all A's. He whispered to me, "You didn't break the bank again, did you?" And I saw the big smile on his face and realized that that made him happy and that God was happy with me too to get good grades. So that inspired me to start getting all A's, and now I attend Notre Dame Prep, and I think he really helped me with that.
I had spent almost 12 years in prison for a crime I did not commit. I came to Grace Centers of Hope. Pastor took me under his wing. I had to return to prison again because my case was overturned in a higher court. I had to go back, and 2 years later I was given an opportunity for a hearing before the parole board for a commutation by the governor. Pastor stood up for me and brought all of Grace Centers of Hope to witness for me, and I'm here because of him. I believe that in my heart.
You and I were the dry bones in the valley, and only God could speak life into those bones. And when you could not and would not come to him, he came to you and saved you.
And we were out of town one time and he was preaching and he didn't take any prisoners. He started calling people all types of no good worms, and it was all about Christ. And this motorcycle biker got up, he was upset and went outside. He was like, "I'm gonna talk to that preacher." And we all had to go out there and kind of have Pastor's back because this motorcycle guy was really angry. But Pastor talked to him and explained to him about the grace of God, and he calmed down. I was really impressed with how he stood for the gospel.
Is when he gave me and my mom two Tigers tickets and $2 bills because it made me feel respected, and like he's someone I can look up to.
When I first started attending Grace Gospel Fellowship, I would stand in the back of the church because I didn't want to go into the church. But the one thing I always remember standing in the back of the church was the way in which he preached the gospel. He heralded the message, and the way he preached, you could tell from his heart how sincere he was about the gospel.
Because when he baptized me, I had my bandana around my neck, and he said, "Miss Space, where's your bandana?" And I said, "It's around my neck." And he goes, "Space, I can't baptize you without a bandana."
But I speak to a variety of different folks. Some from Birmingham, some from the hood. Some are prostitutes, former prostitutes, crack addicts. What is happening in Pontiac is we're changing through the gospel of Jesus Christ. Hoods into neighborhoods.
When my husband relapsed, he was there for me and my kids consistently. It made me feel like he cared about me and that the church was there for me.
I was in front of Judge O'Brien for sentencing on some serious felony charges. My lawyer told me I was going to be incarcerated for quite a long time. And I had mentioned to Pastor Clark the Sunday before, which was only my second Sunday at church, what was going on, and he said he'd pray for me. Well, right before sitting in the box in the jury, or in the court, I just couldn't believe how scared I was and nervous, and all of a sudden I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned around, it was Pastor Clark. And I couldn't believe it, that he would take time out of his day to come and do something like that for someone he'd only met once before then.
We were looking around at a bunch of different churches and decided to stop into Grace Gospel Fellowship. And the first time I heard him preach was the first time I heard the gospel. And it's been evolving and opening up ever since.
12 years ago when I was in the program at Grace Centers of Hope, I heard him preach on what maggots we are and piles of dung and we're worthless, and I know now, and all these years listening to you preach grace, and it's about Christ, Christ only, and that's why without him we are the maggots and we are piles of dung.
You showed us mercy when we didn't deserve mercy. You know, you took a lump of coal like me and kept trying to press on it, make a diamond. And it's still a work in progress through all these years, but your actions have been the biggest testament to the grace and mercy of God. You showed it through living action.
If I could describe Pastor in one word, I would say teacher.
Shepherd.
Dependable.
Grace.
His leader.
Giver.
Father.
Merciful.
Grace.
Phantasmatical.
My champion.
Accepting.
Dad.
Caring.
Tireless.
Unashamed.
Respectful.
Messenger.
Shepherd.
Compassionate.
Fearless.
Real.
Loving.
Comforting.
Selfless.
And we kind of get happy when we read Romans 8 and we know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord, to them who are the called according to his purpose. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate. Whom he predestinated, them he also called. Whom he called, them he also justified. Whom he justified, them he also glorified. Who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect? It is Christ that died, yea, rather is risen again. Who shall separate me from the love of God? I am persuaded that neither life, nor death, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor any other creature shall be able to separate me from the love of God.